Right, so this is chapter 9, implementing Cisco Adaptive Security Appliance, which is ASA. So we're going to be looking at how we can implement basically Cisco security using Cisco firewalls. Okay, so main chapters outlines. We go mainly two sections, you can say. The first one is introduction, and last one summary. The main two key thing we're going to discuss is introduction to ASA, what the ASA is, different types of ASA, and then find the second, which is 9.2. This is a big one, which is about how we can configure the firewall. Okay, so that's what we're going to discuss. So in the introduction, we're going to compare different ASA solution and then explain ASA 5505. This is the one that we're going to be discussing, and we got a similar one in the lab as well. So you can practice with that firewall. So in terms of ASA solutions, we have a different solution available depending on the requirements. When you talk about the solution, obviously they are from Cisco because we are talking about CCNA. The Cisco have a solution for small offices, larger enterprises, and also for internet service provider as well. The one that you can see on the screen over here, for example, ASA 5505, these are for small and branch offices. Okay, and they comes in a different categories as well. Again, they have a different prices based on the feature that they provide and how much bandwidth they support. Again, the selection criteria depends on maximum throughput and also connection per second. And then finally budget, because the more the connections you're going to have, it's going to be cost you more money. And apart from this one, Cisco also offer the firewall integrated with your router as well. So you don't have to have these the hardware device, hardware based firewall. You can have a router and you can have a basic firewalls implemented, integrated into your router. As you're familiar already, you can do some sort of ACLs there and other stuff on a router to have a basic protection. Okay, but those ones are good when you talk about maybe a branch office, maybe not a branch office, but just in a small sort of settings. Okay, but when it comes to a small office or maybe a branch office, you should be looking at something like this. But if you have let's say office for let's say 1 or 2 person working from home or maybe from one room, you may not need a firewalls. Okay, but again, it depends what type of that business they are doing. So if they are into some sort of e-commerce or and they are hosting the e-commerce website on their own server, then obviously they need a firewall, and other sort of security as well. But if they're using ISP, the hosting company, then they may not need it because their website is actually hosted on external server, and those servers are actually protected by the number of security appliances. Okay, so it entirely depends on a customer requirements, what sort of firewalls you can apply there. So these ones you go for small offices and branch offices. Similarly, we got this one, which is ASA 5525X. They come in 3 categories as well. Again, you got 2 Gbps, 3 and 4 Gbps, and they are called Internet Edge model. Okay, and again, they used for medium to large enterprises. And finally, we got third type of firewall, where you use it for data centers. Okay, so they are a 5585. Again, this is quite, I would say, the old slides as well. There are new models available as well. You can find more on a Cisco website. There are a number of the models now available, which are advanced version of this series. Right. So when you talk about the features about firewalls, they provide a number of features. For example, virtualization. Okay, in a virtualization, what happens? A single firewall can be partitioned into multiple virtual interfaces. For example, if you look at this one over here, this is basically a single firewalls, like one physical devices, and you can create some virtual devices on that one. It's like you remember like VLANs that you can create on a switches. So similar to that one, you can have more virtual, let's say, the firewalls on one single hardware-based firewalls, and then you can apply different setting to those firewalls. Okay, so one could be connected to one customer, the second firewall will be applying a rule for a customer B, and third firewall, virtual firewall, this is not actual, remember, this is a virtual firewall, and it applies the rules for customer C. We're going to be looking at each of the one by one, how we can do this one in when you go to the implementation. So just for the introduction, we can do virtualization as well on a firewalls. And the next one is high availability. So what you can do, you can also implement some what you call a redundancy in the firewalls. Okay, so you can have one primary firewalls and you can add one as a secondary firewall. So as you know, it's just like a router as well. So you will have the main one, which will do all the routing and stuff. When this router goes or this firewall goes down, then you will have the secondary or standby firewalls kick in, and it will start doing all the filtering for your network. Okay, again, this can be implemented in firewalls. So another one is called identity firewalls. So I'm sure you guys heard about Microsoft Active Directory. Okay, this is a way you can authenticate users, because they provide you a service through which you can send authentication requests to Microsoft Active Directory, and then the server, the service where the Microsoft Active Directory is installed or running, they will check your authentication username and password, and then based on the authentication result, you can either allow or deny the entry of that user to the server. Okay, and you can have a similar thing called identity firewall that basically implement Microsoft Active Directory on a firewall. Another feature is ASA threat control. So in this one, what you can do, you can see on a picture, you have a firewall and you can have extra module as well. Okay, there are two modules over here. So two existing firewalls, you can have AIP SSM, which is called Advanced Inspection Prevention Service Module. Okay, it's again Advanced Inspection and Prevention Security Service Module. So you can install this one as a module onto your existing firewall that will provide you extra level of security. Okay, like intrusion prevention system, you can have them as a module to your firewall as well, so that you can protect your network against any intrusion activity. Again, similar to that one, you can have some sort of anti-malware capabilities. Again, you need something called CSE module, which is Content Security and Control module, installed or integrated into your firewalls, so you can increase the security of your network. So that's it. These are the 4 features that we discussed. Now going forward to the network designs, I think we discussed a similar sort of design in past as well, where you have outside network, you got the DMG, demilitarized zone, where you put your web servers, and you got your inside network as well. Okay, and during in this topology, you have to just look at this topology over here and this one over here. So any traffic going from inside to outside is permitted. Any traffic going from inside to DMG is also permitted. Any traffic coming from outside to DMG is also permitted in this one. But on the other case, any traffic coming from outside to inside is blocked by the firewall. Okay, again, any traffic coming from DMG to inside is also blocked. Okay, so this is how you design your firewall. This is how you set up the rules in the firewalls. Again, when it comes to rule setting, I will be showing you in a configuration in a configuration section. But this is the basic, the fundamental how you design your network when you talk about the firewalls. Okay, so you have the firewall in place in a center, and any traffic coming from outside will be blocked to inside. Again, from any traffic from DMG going to inside will be blocked, but any traffic from inside will be routed to DMG as well as to the outside network. Okay, and then we got a mode of operations. There are two types of mode of operations of firewalls. One is called a routed mode, and then you got transparent mode. In a routed mode, you can say you go on network 10.2.1.0 here, then you got 10.1.1.0 over here, and then you have this firewall in between. Okay, and both of the interface got the IP addresses attached to them to each of the interface on the firewalls. So any traffic which goes from flow between these two network basically go through this firewalls and it get filtered. While on a transparent mode, it is there's only one IP address which is of this network, and then it's not placed in between. But again, the traffic get filtered through the firewalls. But it got some limitation compared to the routed mode. Okay, and this include like it doesn't support for dynamic routing protocols, for example VPN or quality of services or DHCP relay. They are not supported in this sort of transparent mode, but you can have these ones in routed mode. So these are two modes of operations. Okay, next one is a licensing. Okay, there are two types of license you can have with the firewalls. One is called a basic license. Okay, in a basic you get, obviously you got the limited functionalities that you can have with the basics one. And here is a list of you know the services that you receive with a basic license. And then you got something called security plus. Okay, and this is where you get more functionalities compared to your basic one. And one of the functionality that you get is the number of connections. Okay, how many connections you can get with the basic and premium one. Again, you got some sort of extra level of security as well with the security plus license. Okay, I'll let you go through this one. You can even this is available on your NetAcad as well, where you can see the differences between basics and what are different, how many connections you get, and what are the different security features you can get with the premium or security plus, let's say. Again, if you want to check which version you got on your ASA when you bought it, you can run a command called show version, and it will tell you what sort of you know the license you have on your ASA. And again, you can there's another command called show activation hyphen key that will also provide you this information. Okay, now that's it. That was it about the introduction. We're gonna now start looking at the configuration. Up till now, you guys have any questions? Okay, so now I will be asking you questions then, because configuration configuration is the one which I think you guys already know, even though you don't think you know already, but I think you will know everything from this point onwards. This is just a you trust me. I think once you see my slide, you're gonna say, "Oh yeah, I know this one." Maybe not fully, but you will easily understand. This is just a picture of the firewall. I will show you in a lab as well. We have, two of these in the lab. I did ask, the college to provide us more, and they said, okay, they're gonna look into this one. Hopefully, they will do so. let's hope for the best. I think they are they're gonna do something. Okay. Yeah, that's the sad part. Okay, this one is your ASA. If you look at this one, you will see like there are some lights flashing over here. If it's a solid green light, then that means your firewall is operating at 10 Mbps per second. If it's not, then that means it's 10 Mbps. Again, you got another icons over here that show you whether the power is on, what's the status of firewall is, whether it's active or not, VPNs, and also SSC VPNs, like if you got any VPN connections currently going on. Again, at the back end, it's similar to one you have at home as well. The routers, you got the power buttons, you got the console. If you want to have a console connection to your firewall, like your routers, you can go into your firewall as well. Again, you got the reset button just over here if you want to reset the firewall to the default factory settings, and you got some modules to add some additional functionalities as well. And this one over here, this provides you, if you want to add some external security services, it's called SSC card, if you want to install that one into your firewall, so you can do that one. Okay, this is mainly used for virtualization. When you talk about LANs, you can implement through these Ethernet ports. So now we're going to go into more details into this one. So we have a different level of security. As I mentioned, we looked at this one before. Usually this one, when you talk about these levels, okay, we assigned a different numbers numbers to each security level. The higher the number is, more secure your level is. Okay, so when I say more secure, that means over here, if you look at the inside, okay, the security level is 100. If you look at the outside, okay, it is 0. If you look at the DMG, it's a 50. So what happens over here, if this higher number security level, let's say network, can have access to anything underneath. For example, this is 0, it can access this one as well. This is 50, it can access this one. But the lower numbers, they cannot go on to the higher ones, for example here. But this is not the case with the DMG. DMG is slightly different, where you can have outside traffic going into DMG, because this is what the DMG is for. These levels are mainly, you talk about when you have an inside network, so they can have access to any lower lower levels, or new lower level networks, for example outside or DMG. And this is something we're gonna looking at in more details now. Here are some scenarios for your ASA 5505 deployment. For example, the first scenario over here, this is a small branch office. Okay, in this one, you can have one firewalls on your inside VLAN. Okay, and you will have this E07, E05 maybe connected to your phones, and you have a network printers and other workstations, and all your traffic basically gonna go through your firewalls. Okay, and then you can have a small office deployment. Over here, you can create a DMG now. DMG is one of your web server to whom this outside network will have access to as well. Okay, this is the one that we just saw before. You can set the security level to this network over here to 100, and maybe this one to 50, and this one to 0. So this is how you can see in a small business network. And finally, you have something called a larger enterprise. And this one, the ESA 5505 can be used by commuter or a home user to connect to centralized location using a VPN. And in this one, these guys, telecommuter, they will have some sort of software installed through which they will access corporate resources which are available. So these are the 3 different scenarios. Now we're gonna finally jump on to the configurations. Okay, I think you guys familiar with this one. You know the routers or switch. If you have a console connection to that one, you in a router you usually by default it says router and greater than sign. In a switch it says switch greater than sign, and in a firewall it says Cisco ASA greater than sign. Okay, and rest of the things are same. You got the user exec mode, you got the privilege exec mode, you got the global configuration mode, and you also got sub configuration mode like you have in your router and in your switch config when you go to the switch configuration. Okay, so there is no difference when you're gonna when you will be configuring your firewall. It is basically like your router. And on the top you got the commands, okay, which are quite similar to what you have as a router CLI. As you know, in a router you have enable secret password. Over here you got the enable secret password as well. And in a router you have something called line BTI04 password login. Over here you simply type in password WD and type in the password, and that's it. Okay, you don't have to write in the 3-line code. You can simply write in password WD and it will set a password for you for VTY line. And then you go IP route. This is one of the command that you set up the default or static routes. In this one, in Cisco ASA Firewall, the command is route outside. So this is the command. And then you have show IP interface brief. Here you go show interface IP brief. So slightly differences over here, but majority of the command, the syntax is gonna be similar. There might be some additional things that you may have to remember, but remember this is not something we're gonna be implementing in your final exam. But it is important to know these sort of stuff if you want to be implementing this in your workplace. But in your exam, we're gonna be configuring it using a wizard through which they will give you options. You simply choose from them and you set up security on your firewall. So these are the commands and this is the equivalent. Yes, yes, it's gonna be yeah, it's gonna be by wizard, and this is what we're gonna cover in chapter 10. Okay, but this is again good to know what these commands are. And again you got something called show version command, okay, and that will show you whether the version of your firewall. You got something called help command as well. You remember you got a help command in your router as well. In router, it's simply if you type the question mark, it will basically give you more information what sort of command you can type in. So in this one you can use this question mark as well, or you can type in help and then type in the command that you need a more help with, and then it will give you the more information about that particular command. And this is some sort of a default configuration of your the Cisco 5505. You can see you got the host number, security information, and also the VLAN information. It's all over here in by default. This is the initial setup wizard like you have in your router when you load up initially. So it will ask you a few information. For example, use this configuration and save to flash, yes. And but again, you don't have to go through this one. You can simply say no. When in the router, we usually skip this one. We don't want to go through the wizard. We usually try to do it manually. When you go into the global configuration, this is where you make all the changes, not through this initial wizard. But this is again same as you have in your router. Do usually ask you to provide all the information, and you just start providing all the information like the host name. obviously we don't use the wizard. We basically go into the router or in a firewall in this case, and then we use a host command to specify the name. But you can do this one through the wizard as well. This wizard is different than what we're going to discuss in chapter 10. Okay, this is again using CLI, and the one that we're gonna be discussing is like a web-based system that you just follow the instructions. Now we can configure management settings and services. Okay, again we can you can set up, what they are saying, you can set up the clock. I'm not gonna be again discussing how to set up the clock because I'm sure you guys are aware of this one. But again, the commands are here. What they are saying, you have to type enable, then go to the user exec mode, then type in the clock set command to set up the clock, and then you can type in configure terminal or config t to go to the configuration mode. This is where you can do more settings. For example, this host name, domain name, enable password, banner MOTD. I was going to ask you these questions, but maybe I'm sure this you guys know already what these commands are. We don't have to go into more details. But if you feel like you need to, you're not familiar with any of the command, do let me know. Then we can discuss those commands. This is examples how to configure basic settings. Again, we have done this one a lot, and this is an example how to set up encryption into the in a firewall. So show password encryption by default is gonna be disabled, so then you can enable this one by going into that particular you can go to the global configuration mode, create a key, and then password exit, and then you can show password encryption. Then it should say that it has been, encryption is there. Going, we got local VLAN interface commands. You can again have your VLANs created on that one as well. So we have commands like interface VLAN number. Then you got something called the name IF, which is name interface and interface name. You have to specify the interface name over here. Again, you can set up the security for the interface as well from 0 to 10, and then the next one is configuring IP address on VLAN interface. Again, you can do it manually using DHCP or using PPPoE as well. And where you have some commands like IP address PPPoE or IP address PPPoE set route, which is the same command, but it also requests and install a default route to upstream devices. Here are examples of how they are set up, how the VLANs are set up in ASA in firewalls, which is quite similar to what you do in your routers. And here you go assigning ports to VLANs. I'm sure you guys familiar with this one. You go to the interface, use a command called switch port, access VLAN or whatever the VLAN number is, and simply say no shut. This is a good command because if the interface is already shut down, and then you have to make sure it is active. So you can use no shutdown command for that one. And here you can say show switch VLAN. Again, this command is different. You remember what the command is for to see all the VLANs? Anyone? Any guesses? Yeah, it's a show VLANs. Yeah, you don't need to have a switch here. You can have a show VLANs, and it will show you the interfaces. Okay. Again, you have something called show interface IP briefs. You have a list of interfaces and their status. Again, this is similar to what we have, but instead of saying show IP interface brief, it says show interface IP brief. I don't know why they decided to change it, but this is how it is. So these are again some commands. Again, as you can see, this is just an overview of what you have done. The only difference is there are some commands are slightly, let's say, different than what you have in your router or in a switch. But That's it. In a static route, again, you got something called in a static. You remember how to set up the static route in routers or switches? Not the switches, but in a router. Well done. Yeah, exactly. So over here, this is slightly different. Say route outside, and rest of thing is same. You can have an interface or you can have IP address. So it's the same thing. Yeah. So again, you have Tannet as well, like the one that you have before. You can set it up Tannet here, and again, all the commands are here. I don't think we have to go through this one because they are self-explanatory. What you have to do, all the settings are similar, like a timeout, whether you want to set it inside or outside. So you can do that one. Similarly, you can do a SSH as well. The same sort of settings. You have to create the username and password, assign that one to local, which is using local username and passwords, and then you can assign the SSH again on a one particular IP address, subnet mask inside or outside. You can do that one, similar to what we do. We call something called NTP, which is Network Time Protocol. Do you remember what NTP is? Yes, that's right. So you can set up something called NTP, and all the devices gonna basically get the time sync with that NTP server. So this one again is gonna help you, like Holly said, with any time log, syslog, so that the timing is correct. When as a network administrator, you're gonna look at the errors, so you can see the exact, the correct time is there. So it's not like the device that you're monitoring, it go a different time, maybe one day, or even the 1 hour is a big thing. When it's come to the network security, the one day is again make a huge difference. Having NTP server in place gonna eliminate all sort of issues that you can have with the syslogs and their validity. So again, in your in your firewall, again, you can set up the NTP server as well, and you can authenticate that one. You can say NTP authenticate, which enable authentication with the NTP server, and then you got NTP trusted key, which is basically your key that you need for authentication. And again, you can have NTP authentication key, your version of and your password, and you can set up the NTP server with the NTP server command. So similar to what you do with the you have done with the routers. Now we got something called DHCP. You remember what the DHCP is? Anyone wanna give a go at DHCP? What the functionality DHCP, what they provide, what they do, DHCP services or server? Yes. So when your DHCP server basically provides you the IP or IP configuration or network addresses for your devices. So it includes your IP address, your subnet mask, your gateway address, and so other information. And you can configure DHCP on your firewall as well, like you do it on your router. It's a similar thing. You assign a pool addresses, you assign it to one DHCP, and then you can also set up the lease time as well, how long you want to assign that particular address to your devices. So it's similar what you do in your in the router. Next one is something called object groups. This is something I think is a new one. You had this one. We discussed this one previously in this chapter in this Cisco security. I think we discussed where you can combine the commands into a one group, and then you can assign those groups to different users. Okay, the object groups are similar. It's like you remember, have you done the object oriented programming, where you can have a classes and you can have objects, and object can be used to access classes. So basically in a class you can have a number of variables, isn't it? And then instead of having different variables to declare in your program, you can create a class. You can have all the variables there, and you can just create an object and then access all the variables of that class or all the properties of that class using that object. Okay, now we got Cisco security or firewalls. Now in this one, objects are quite similar, but they in terms of role they are quite similar. So you can create an object as well, and you can put the object into something called object group, which is a class, let's say. And so you can apply the object groups to anything. For example, ACLs. You remember when ACLs, if you wanna allow or deny any host, you run a command called permit a host and the host IP address, isn't it? And that command will either permit or deny that particular host. Now, for example, you have a 10 host, so that means you have to create 10 different entries, isn't it? ACL entries. So instead, what you can do, you can put them into something called object group and then apply that ACL to that particular object group. So whatever that ACL is, whether it's allow or it's deny, then all the hosts in that object group will have the same sort of setting applied. Okay, so that's what the object groups are. Now I can explain this one in a more details. So advantage of having this one is that when an object is modified, the changes is automatically applied to all the rules that use the specified object. So it's make life easier as your network engineer in terms of configuration. So there are two types of object that you can have. You can have something called a network object. Let me use pointer. You can have a network object and you can have a service object as well. The network object will contain a single IP address and a subnet mask, while the service object contain a protocol and optional source and destination ports information. Okay, so network object, again, IP addresses, subnet mask. Service object contain the information about your ports and protocols like HTTP, FTP, like this. So now we're gonna look at more details into how we can configure these objects. So firstly, this is the example for how you can configure a network object. So the command is simply called object. You have to go to the global configuration before that. So obviously, as you know, all the configurations, they are done in a configuration mode. So you go to global configuration, type in the command called object. Okay, and then a network, and give it a name, example 1, for example, and then add a host to this one. Okay, and that's it. And that's how you basically configure an object. Now you can apply this object to any sort of services. I will show you in a second how to do that one. This is one example for your service object. In a service, you have a different type of services. For example, EIGRP, ICMP, you got IP as well. You got PCP. There are different sort of services where you can configure a service object. This is example how to configure a service object. Here we are configuring FTP, WW, World Wide Web that we are configuring in this service object. So they have two objects here. So obviously they have two services configured under one object. Now, then we move on to the object group. So the object groups can be configured together to create an object group. So you can group all the objects together. So you can have an object group. And by grouping like object together, an object group can be used in access control entries. This is what I mentioned to you before. You can create a ACL using object group. And instead of having to enter a ACE for each object separately, the ASA support various type of object group. For example, a network-based, service-based. They have something called security as well, ICMP type, user types, and I will show you how we can configure this one in this slides over here. For example, over here we created an object group called object group network admin host, and then you got something called all host. And admin host, you put all the computer or host who are admin, and then in all host you specify all the hosts which are non-admin, and then you specify your ACLs. You can specify the ACLs on these one. For example, admin host, you can say, okay, admin hosts are allowed to access or do their certain activities, and on all hosts maybe they will be denied to access maybe router configuration or having SSH connections, and or any other the services that you wanna specify using ACLs. So you can do that one as well. So again, there are more example for service object. Again, you can have two types, as I mentioned, network and service object. In a service object, you specify the settings for like www, HTTP, POP3, NTP. These are the services. So you can specify these settings here. Again, here's examples of object group examples, further examples. The all configurations are provided to you here. And finally, your favorite ACLs, access control list. So as you can see, we are basically covering, that we covered in the past modules. We're covering ACL, NTP, basic configurations. Object groups are something, new, but they are basically, it's like a class, an object-oriented programming where you can put everything in one, and then you apply all the settings to that particular group. ACLs, we are familiar. They, in terms, yeah. Okay, shall we have a break here then in ACL? Okay.